Excellency, former President Ajekum. Hello, sir. And distinguished fellow panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. For once, I may have to admit that I found some common grounds with President John Ajekum Kufuor when he says that he thought the Council of State should open itself to the general public. I remember telling members of the council in one of my meetings, or not the very first one, but inviting them to share our deliberations with the public so as to demystify what's going on. But of course, one of them said, no, it's okay, let's keep it private, etc. What could I do? I just had to leave it like that. First of all, let me also apologize once again for my lateness. My battle with malaria comes almost every 6 months. And when I'm done, I may have to excuse myself to go for my second jab. So do please excuse me. I'm sure Kufuor will represent me. And sometimes when he says, look west, look east, please. Ladies and gentlemen, on my behalf, that is. First, let me thank the Friedrich Ebert Foundation and the Committee of Fellows of the Institute of Law and Public Affairs for organizing this discussion. Incidentally, since I was coming late, I was hoping for once I would have the privilege of him waiting for me. But as usual, I have to come and wait for him. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to make 7 brief contributions to this discussion. First, the Council of State, as constructed under the 1992 Constitution, was initially operated during my presidency. My colleagues and I, who were then in government, are therefore uniquely placed to make observations based on our experiences with the National Council of State. Second, my overall assessment of the Council of State is that it is an important constitutional body and should be retained. There are many ways to improve the composition, functions, and operations of the Council. But it is not one of the institutions in the 92 Constitution that should be abolished. The third point I wish to make is that the Council of State represents one of those institutions that grew out of our African traditional system of governance. In African communities that are properly run, a king or chief is only as good as the elders who surround him, and the women who, working in the background, determine what he does or does not do. So, the first check on a chief is his elders. The second and more ruthless check on the chief is the Queen Mother and her Council of Women Advisors. Traditionally, a small group of people distinguished for their spirituality, experience, knowledge, wisdom, honesty, integrity, and patriotism is formed to give advice to the chief. The fact that this traditional system has been seamlessly imported to our current constitutional governance gives credence to the theory that calls for the construction and deployment of an authentic African system of constitutional governance that meets the needs of the majority of our people. Ladies and gentlemen, flowing from what I just said, and moving on to my fourth point, in consonance with the criteria for a traditional elder, a member of the Council of State must possess certain characteristics, some of which I just said, but honor, courage, truthfulness, love for country, love for human beings and people, and above all, spirituality. Unfortunately, some members of the Council of State over the years have not quite possessed these qualities, all of them, most of them. We must ensure, I'll tell you a little story when it's done. We must ensure that the processes for pre-qualifying, electing, and appointing these members are tightened up. In the traditional system, an elder who misbehaved was expected in the past to commit suicide, but honorably. Now that such methods of social control are absent, we must ensure that the criteria for becoming a member of the Council of State is upped, and the citizenry should be vigilant and hold the members accountable for their actions and omissions. The 1992 Constitution provides for a 25-member Council of State and specifically includes the President of the National House of Chiefs, a former Chief Justice, a former IGP, a former Chief of Defense Staff, and an elected representative from each region of Ghana, leaving plenty of room for 11 more members from a variety of fields. Whilst the positions occupied by the named former officers can be an effective proxy for their competitiveness, beg your pardon, for their competence and morality, the same does not necessarily apply to the elected members. It is there that we need to focus some attention. My fifth point relates to a gap in the constitutional provisions. The three former officials, that is the Chief Justice, the IGP, and the CDS, are mandatory. But what happens if all the three former officials are unavailable? If there is no living ex-Chief Justice, for instance, does this seat remain vacant? This has actually occurred in our recent history. And until former Chief Justice Georgina Wood was sworn into the Council of State recently, that position was vacant. Meanwhile, there were capable retired justices of the Supreme Court, capable of contributing to the deliberations and decisions of the Council of State from the perspective of the women and men of the bench. Next, I would like to state that the advice offered by the Council of State must remain advisory. This is in keeping with our traditional system. Whether or not the President takes the advice of the Council must depend on the caliber of the advisors, their motives, and the quality of their advice. A properly constituted Council of State, which displays a nationalistic posture of assisting the President succeed, and which is not afraid to tell the President the truth, will always have the ear of the presidency. The ear of any mature president. It would be most unwise for a president to refuse to give careful consideration to recommendations of such a council. The speculation as to whether the president is bound by the advice of the Council of State or not must end. The Constitution is very clear on the matter. Our traditional system of governance, from whence we borrow the institution of the Council, is clear on the matter. Seventh, and lastly, there is a potential conflict between the role of the Cabinet and that of the Council of State. However, if we stay true to their roles as expressed in the Constitution, there would be no actual conflict. In practical terms, the role of the Council of State is to counsel the President, to provide in-depth, wise, seasoned, reflective, and sober advice to the President on very critical matters of national importance, of who should hold sensitive national positions, such as the Chief Justice and Chair of the Electoral Commission, who may be granted a pardon or reprieve for a crime. The Cabinet, on the other hand, is to assist the President in the more technical business of determining the general policy of the nation. Should we have deeper decentralization? Should we have a national health insurance scheme? The two bodies, ladies and gentlemen, have very different functions, clearly set out in the Constitution. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, a well-chosen Council of State is an asset to a government, but only if its members show nationalism, initiative, and boldness. If they tend to be passive, meeting the prescribed 4 times a year and doing only what they are asked to do, then the council is a very expensive body. During my tenure as president, I consulted the council quite regularly because they represented a wide array of opinions from across the country, and their expertise spanned both the civilian and security domains. It is important for every president to ensure that the members of the council represent a good blend of wise and mature personalities. It is no good to appoint people because they have avowed allegiances to your political party. They must be persons who, while sharing your ideals, have built a reputation for expressing clear and unbiased thoughts and arguments. During my time as head of state, I requested that the Council of State make public all the interactions, especially those with me. This was aimed at demystifying, as I said, the Council and allowing the good people of Ghana to understand and appreciate their role. The relevance of the Council of State cannot be overstated. The members of the Council of State must speak from a point of strength and expertise. They must not wait to be fed with information from reporters, the media, and other sources. They must become the eyes and the ears of the president and the nation by engaging with the ministries, the military and judiciary, etc., all arms of government and the private sector. By engaging with government and non-governmental institutions, the Council will have greater understanding and appreciation of issues in order to offer relevant assessment and recommendations to the President. Proactivity will be the Council's best way of contribution to the governance process. In totality, however, the Council has been relevant and will be relevant going forward. I do not think they should be given additional powers, as they are primarily an advisory body. We have a cabinet and parliament to play those other roles some experts are calling for the council to play. And another group with such powers will create a political clutter instead. Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, sometime towards the end of our time in office, when we had become so discolored, I was asking someone, I'm trying to play my part with my interaction with the number one. Why shouldn't you also go and tell this thing, what you're telling me, to the chairman of the Council of State, to take these concerns to the presidency? That's what he said. The lady chairperson said to her. Now, why aren't no the assembly but go to name? Invite me another time, and I'll share some of the painful realities that power tends to affect and block. That's why I kept emphasizing courage, boldness, courage. Many years ago, when Mandela came here, and we gave him $1 million from the Bank of Ghana, he ended up in other countries and in another exceptionally rich country. Very, very, very rich country. We used to talk a lot. And, of course, soliciting for funds to go and fight for his people. Not the earlier fight, to go and fight for multi-party democracy, his party. And he was told by the people in charge of this government, they'll bring the item to the airport if he'll be kind enough to take the lead and wait at the airport. And that's exactly what he did. President Mandela waited for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Well, this man has spent 27 years in jail before. Waiting for another 5, 6 hours, 12 hours is nothing to him. At the 4th hour, you've got to understand, when they say to wait at the airport for it, those things, if they're coming in the huge millions, you need suitcases, and they weigh quite a lot. I know. Ladies and gentlemen, he waited and waited till, yeah, of course, it was quite late. Then the big man's brother, who was also a very big man, then drove to the airport to come and tell President Mandela to apologize, for having kept him at the airport for so long. And then he went on to say that the vehicle that was bringing the money got involved in an accident. Mandela looked into his face, and said, "So the money too is injured." You want to hear more? Invite me. No, but the point I'm trying to make here is, when you cannot create an environment, the kind of chemistry that would make people say, "Sir, this is torn," or "You're getting naked," you'll be walking naked the next day. Imagine, you have all the protection, you're so big, so powerful. Nobody can suggest or make little criticisms to you, to the point where this brain of yours can concoct such an idiotic concept of an accident. Come and look into this old man's face and tell him the vehicle bringing the thing was involved in an accident. Of course, he's not one of your minions. So he looks into your face and he asks you a simple, beautiful question that any child could have asked you. But the big adults around you dare not ask you such things. So you carry with you this kind of air that makes it difficult for you to see through. Do you understand what I'm saying? I hope so. When I was in office, from the PNDC time to the NDC government, and even yesterday, we had a meeting. I never sat as the chairperson because I didn't want my being in the seat to intimidate anybody from saying their piece. I mean, that is not to say that sometimes I wouldn't exercise a little veto power. So Justice Annan used to sit as chairperson almost all the time. when he's not a PV or Idris Mahama, just like he did yesterday. And I sit on the side. Doesn't mean I will not contribute. In fact, I become even more, stronger when I have to also contribute from the sides. But the point, no, let me stop here. Invite me again. Thank you.